I appreciate you guys coming out. This is a really kind of interesting topic and something that I'm still learning a lot from. There's not a lot of great experts. The gentleman here, Brant, I think, came up and asked about resources, and there's not a lot of great ones. So maybe if there's a little time at the end, we can kind of share each other's ideas about who we're finding good information from. So I kind of kick into the presentation. I got a handful of slides here. So this is about cross-cultural UX. Hopefully you're in the right session. I'm Will Sullivan on Twitter at Journalism, and I'm going to have my tweet deck open, so if you have questions and don't want to raise hands or whatever, you can tweet at me and I'll read them or grab them at the end, and we can try and knock them out if we have time. This is where I am on the internets. Director of mobile at the bbg.gov, which no one really knows what it is. We are the Broadcasting Board of Governors, very similar to the BBC except for the US, and the big difference with us is we're not publishing for the US, we're publishing for countries that don't have a free and open internet and free and open press. So we run the Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio ETV Marti, Radio Free Asia, and the MBN Middle East Broadcasting Networks, which is Radio Sawa and Al Hurra. These are the countries we kind of focus on. These are kind of the 5 public-facing brand entities. I'm in the team that kind of runs the IT infrastructure, innovation, design and development. We're in more than 100 countries, publishing in 61 languages on broadcast, radio, TV, and digital, with more than 84 news and language services. And if there's 84 language and news services, but only 61 languages, there's a little overlap. Some of the countries overlap. In Gallup, we have a total weekly audience of 203 million listeners, engagers across radio, TV, and digital, predominantly focused in Africa, Asia, the old Eastern Bloc, Cuba. This is kind of from our global report, kind of showing you visually the countries that we're focused on. Any of the colors basically are countries we broadcast in and help deliver news and information, free press. So we do things from publishing news information to building proxies to enable people to get information on the internet. You guys hear me okay? I don't want to trail off. So here are all the languages we're supporting across all of our entities, and these also include right-to-left languages, which talk a little bit about can be pretty tricky, especially since some of these aren't supported natively by iOS and Android. They're quickly growing as I think the first world markets have started to become saturated with mobile devices. They're starting to expand into emerging markets, but it's not happening too fast. I want to make it clear I'm an expert in content, especially news content, product design, development, but not languages. So like, when I saw this was like a really good kind of way for me to actually learn some of the languages that we have to cover. I'm sorry to put up something that you guys have to read to think it's funny, but basically all these different scripts are really unique, and a lot of them have different things. Like you see like the Burmese one at the very bottom where everything's really tightly compact together compared to English where things have a little bit more space between the letters. It's a really interesting position, really interesting to kind of learn about typography sets and all the challenges these people face, that especially when computing devices, digital devices don't support what they natively read in. So approaching my approach to our UX values and how we build products, got kind of five tenets that I kind of focus on. First and foremost is empathy. A lot of these users in these countries are used to being kind of second-class citizens, not only from their governments and from the rest of the world, but from digital technology too. Like I said, fonts that aren't supported, and not being able to read your language on your device is a big challenge. And these aren't even like kind of very small populations. Things like Arabic not being supported until most recently on Android is a really big challenge. And there's not even localizations allowed in the app stores for Arabic in the iOS app stores. Focus on balance, where you don't have an unlimited budget and time and resources, and especially when you're trying to serve from Cuba, probably one of the most technologically starved countries in the world, to some of the Southeast Asian countries where they do have high levels of technology adoption. balancing the time, budget, technological and cultural challenges is a big part of my job, trying to find a solution that will work good enough for almost everybody, and in cases where we can do customization, that will work very well. Embracing standards and tracking them, especially in digital landscape as they're constantly changing, constantly evolving. I'll talk a bit about this later. But especially, a lot of these people face this huge digital divide where they didn't grow up like us with computers in their homes and wired internet and ample computers at libraries and in our schools. Their first experience a lot of the time is through a mobile phone. They're kind of not the, there's a lot of talk about mobile first, but they are really the mobile only audiences. So finding the standards that they're going to be exposed to and start to understand as they kind of make that digital divide jump and also that technical literacy jump. You guys have probably all seen like the save button in Word is like an old floppy disk. And even people in our technology rich, very fortunate communities, like young kids don't know what a floppy disk is, but they know that's the save button. So you got to think about how your icons and how you're visually explaining things that would make sense to them. And it's a really big challenge. So we try and track digital standards to see what people are currently using and what we can kind of graft into our work. Things like YouTube, Facebook, even though they're big technology companies, they're very, very high penetration. And kind of swimming in their wake, I think, is something that we really focus on, trying to see what becomes the standard share icon and how they explain some of these things, especially because with YouTube, they're kind of doing video, which is sort of broadcast-ish to what a lot of our content is. And when that doesn't exist, sometimes we have to kind of innovate and try and figure out new solutions, test new solutions. Testing is a really big part. Well, the next one is basically rapid constant feedback and testing is a very big part of what we do, because this is such a constantly evolving, very quickly evolving field. It's really hard because a lot of the research that's done in the field through huge agencies like Gallup it takes a year to turn them, and that's not fast enough for us. I mean, a year in the internet is 10 years in the real world, in a human life. So we're always trying to find tools to do really quick tests, especially with our journalists in the field, to get feedback on what's working and what's not. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. So how do we do it? I'm going to kind of rip through these 10 and then kind of talk about them individually. First big focus is performance. Diversity, color, localizations, iconography, typography. Right-to-left interaction design is a big challenge that I'm learning a ton about, that is really evolving craft. Grids, customer service, and lean testing. First things, performance, and this is especially focused on sort of the last mile load times. Sorry. Performance is definitely a feature. This is something that's starting to get a growing adoption in the development areas, especially in countries that are lucky to have stable 2G. 3G is not as common as it is here nearly. Most big bandwidth things, especially things like video that we produce, has to be viewed either on Wi-Fi, at Wi-Fi cafes and things like that, or we have to be very smart about how we're encoding and how we're editing also, what kind of content we're putting up, and you can't just throw everything up on the internet. It's not a big truck, as Ted Stevens once said. So I guess for this, when we're building this, when I'm talking about real performance goals, you have to set a performance budget, which is Tim Kadlick talks about a lot. We have a max speed of 3 seconds on 3G is our target goal for our websites. We're currently building responsive towards that goal. Right now we have 2 split websites, basically a desktop website and an m.dot website. I'd love to talk more with people about that, but in our environment, we really have to split it off because the needs we have a super fast low bandwidth mobile website. We have one even kind of a featherweight one that basically rips out all the photos and everything and makes it even faster than our basic mobile website. We're starting building from our mobile website, responsive up to the desktop over the next year. That's been like a 3-year process, actually, to do this really smart. For applications, this means building applications that are very performance focused. I'll talk a little bit about some of the more details, but we really try and keep our binary file less than 5 megabytes, which is something that's really never talked about. A lot of these applications, especially as devices grow and get larger and larger, low-end devices don't have gigabytes and gigabytes of storage, and things like Facebook, they're, depending on which, they have many different binaries that they submit, but some of them are up to 50, 70 megabytes, which you can't put on a phone that only has 250 megabytes of storage. So we try and keep the core binary to 5 megabytes, and then people can turn on and off images and basically optimize the application from there, so that they're not, if it comes to between us and Facebook, I hope we would win that battle, but I don't think we are. So we have to be smart about that, and optimize everywhere we possibly can. And again, this is the most recent report from Akamai on the state of the internet and average broadband speeds. And most of our audiences, you'll see here, probably a tenth of the speed that we're used to here in the U.S. on average, and sometimes less. The other big challenge, I think, is that it's not talked about a lot, is stability of their networks. So when packet losses happen or power outages happen, which happens amazingly frequently still in Africa, how does your website respond to that? How are things cached? And being really smart about that is really important. And it's a lot of kind of techie, nerdy stuff, and not kind of a traditional UX design sort of experience, but working with the developers to really make sure that that's built in. It's an experience that the users are going to feel, but a lot of designers don't have kind of their hands in it. So you have to work very closely with them to kind of get them to understand the importance of that and how we build. So big things that we focus on: optimizing content load priorities, caching, lazy loading, and background loading. Always offer a low bandwidth mode or a feather mode where we take out images, and images are huge on the internet. They're just the biggest, well, outside of Netflix. If you take Netflix and like kind of the streaming HD video, images on websites are the next biggest download hindrance. In our applications, we focus on offering offline saving of content. Can't do this as well on the web because there's a lot of limits with the browser buffers, and but this is a feature that's very, very popular that a lot of people don't talk about as much, especially in the Western world. Again, small binary packages are another big feature that we focus on. And having a really fast global CDN network, serving adaptive content, using server-side detection. This is all of what we're working on with our responsive approach right now. It's really critical, and especially getting feedback of that last mile. That's the one thing that's really challenges. A lot of the CDN networks, they have great big hubs in major metro cities, but when it comes down to Bangui, and that last mile is where they're going to get choked up. So you got to have a lot of people on the ground, and we're fortunate in our situation. We've got total about 4,000 people working for our organization, about 1,000 based here in the DC metro area, which is kind of our hub where we have most of our production done because it's more safe and secure than some of these other countries. But being able to have people on the ground, on the streets, being able to send them, here, can you do these 3 simple tasks to test something out for me, really helps a lot. Diversity. This is really, really critical for our organization. I think for all organizations, but especially if you're trying to build cross-cultural experiences. I am not the most diverse person in the world, Midwestern born, white male. But our organization is very diverse, and I really, really strive to make sure every hiring decision I make is focused on this, so that people can, you can't really understand the challenges unless you really live it, and unless you really have people that are communicating to you, and that you kind of really understand how important things like making performance the #1 feature. Performance is a feature. Making that the number one feature of your experience. So, my team, we're from 3 different continents, 7 different countries, speak more than a dozen languages. Our entire organization, like I said, we've got a hub here with about 1,000 people, the majority of which are journalists, broadcast journalists, that can help us take a look at the application, take a look at the websites, give us quick feedback, especially on our testing cycles. Color is a big challenge. The cultural implications are really huge, and especially trying to find a compromise and balance with limited budget and resources is very difficult. So here's one example. So what across different cultures, this is one color. What represents weddings, danger, purity, and mourning and funerals? Anyone have a question or a guess? Purple? That's pretty good. White, yep. I say weddings and in some places funerals, definitely.
I was going to say red.
Red, got it. Yes. So balancing this is incredibly impossible. There's this really great chart. I want to give you a URL. I'll give you the URL afterwards because it's so tiny there you won't be able to read it. But this is, and it's also a little blown out because the lights. This is a great chart basically showing values and then regions and what the colors mean. And you can kind of see there's not really a lot of clear things. Like this is, I think, purity. And I think the black one way up at the top there, that's evil. So black and white are a little bit more black and white, but the rest of these, there's not a lot of very shared values. I think the red at the bottom is passion. So really trying to balance this is incredibly difficult, especially in some of these countries where there's a lot of really serious cultural sensitivities. Green in the Islamic world is sort of a very religious color, because I think it was Muhammad's favorite color. But again, balance has to kind of come into play here. So we're trying to make decisions based on, what's going to work for the 80% at least. So purple is an interesting one. Purple and gold are both very interesting because they in many cultures have kind of a very regal or prestigious or governmental kind of value to them, which depending on the country, if they're a oppressed country and you're basically, your app looks like it's all purple and gold and you're the king, people might not like that as much. And you guys have all downloaded tons of apps and seen kind of all the crazy different colors, and you'll probably notice that a lot of kind of the blue, gray, green, teals are sort of very popular, which is what we generally go for and use with our entities. 3 of them are basically blue, shades of blue focused. One's green in Asia, because the green in Asia is very kind of like prosperous and about environment and health. So in our designs, we try and minimize color as much as possible and let the content, the photos, sing and not put in extra meaning with the color except for the core brand. Localizations, this is a really big challenge and something that there's many companies out there that will help you with. We're very fortunate that, again, we have journalists and people who have the background, the language skills, and a portion of them are at least locally that we can kind of tap and help us with this. But I noticed I didn't call this translations because they're not translations. There's a huge difference. You can't take a spreadsheet, ship it off, and expect the user experience to be the same because a button that says submit versus a button that says upload can be 2 very different things. So having that kind of cultural context, the culture and context information available is really critical. So this is why whenever we're doing launches, we always go in person to people in our bureaus or try and do a screen share through Skype or something like that, walk people through and get their feedback on what things should actually be called. I'm almost out of time, so I'm not going to be able to show this, but it's very cool. We'll tweet it out. It's a video that basically ran. This is people say, "Oh, we'll just Google Translate. It'll be all fine." This is a video where they ran The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air through Google Translate in many different languages, and it's just absurd what comes out. So with localizations, really focus on localizing all the content experience. Store listings, the app stores have really expanded greatly to offer a lot more localizations, but again, things like Arabic are still missing. And Apple especially has really focused on Western worlds and not the emerging markets. Google has really embraced kind of Nokia model and expanded the international or emerging market listings that we get as many translations as possible. And that includes doing screenshots in the localization, any videos that you post, just localize everywhere, like make it like you're part of that community. Marketing promotional efforts are, again, a big part of it. You want to be part of that authentic voice, speak to them in their language, and find local voices who help raise you up. Again, Apple's starting to expand this, 40 languages. Google started like what is it, like, I think it's $150 and they'll localize your app. I haven't tried it. I'm not sure how good it would be, but Google does things interesting, so they're pushing. But yeah, like Google has really expanded their localizations. And it's really difficult to get this done, but it's crucially important. It exponentially expands your potential market. And the way we do it is actually through a partnership with the Reese's Reese's Pieces, the peanut butter cup companies, by basically bribing people with chocolate. It's very difficult because they're working journalists, they're busy, and we basically have to come and do it. Be very friendly with them and try and just get 5 minutes of their time to get them to look through something and help us with the localizations. Iconography. This keeps me up at night. I'm trying to track this as much as possible, and there's not really great standards or leadership, I think, in this, especially globally. And like I said, with the save button, the save the floppy disk, this can save you a lot of time on translations, but you can also go way off the reservation and really confuse people. But when it works, put a bird on. I'm referring to Twitter there. Like, people understand what the Twitter icon is. There's so many different potentials. This is a funny post that was about Facebook and different things they need to add. But these are all kind of cultural things that people might not understand. The burning cross, like who in Africa would exactly understand that means exactly racism from the U.S. And again, this is not a silver bullet by any means. There's been usability tests that have proven that this doesn't always work when it comes to if you should do icon, a text translation, or icon and text translation. Icons aren't always the best solution. So trying to find solutions is really tough, especially in countries that don't have words for things like proxies. Countries that didn't have a written language until about 60 years ago is very challenging. I do try and find and embrace things like Font Awesome, follow the standards. This is a very powerful web font that basically has, I think now there are over 400 different icons. So looking at this and trying to figure out how that works, show it to our journalists, show it to people in the field, see how they react to it, and embrace the standards when possible. And again, keep focused on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, WhatsApp, the big social media outlets that are really getting large audiences globally, seeing what they're embracing as the standards and kind of, again, swim in their wake, follow their lead. And when you have to experiment, try A/B tests, see how things work, get as much feedback from actual users as possible. Typography is really, really difficult, and especially if you buy all your devices here, they're really, really difficult because in a lot of countries, font packs are installed by the operators. It's very common in other countries also to just take your phone to a mobile shop, $5, they'll root it or jailbreak it, so you can install whatever you want, especially in some of the Asian countries where counterfeiting is kind of like a point of pride. So like, for instance, the American Samsung didn't fully support Arabic ligatures for the typography correctly. And we were just wrestling with it forever. And then we had people start doing testing in country, and it wasn't as bad as we thought it was. But this is also what version you choose to support really affects this. Android's really, again, really pushing to do more globalized work. The 4 and above supports a lot more of these kind of emerging markets fonts. So right now we currently support to Android 2.3, but we're debating when to cut that off. And it's a really double-edged sword because so many of our audiences are in these countries with very low-end phones and not making year-over-year upgrades like Americans do. But luckily 4.0 is growing, and hopefully that will make that conversion quicker. So the other challenge about typography is in design and user experience, how people view the perception of the organization based on the design. So in America, white space is a good thing. It's airy, it's sophisticated. But in China, everything is very compact and tight. And when they see an airy design like this one, they think, oh, you don't have any content, you don't have any value. But this looks like, it drives me nuts. It's so like crunched together. But they think if you have this kind of airiness to it that you don't have a lot of information, you don't have enough news. So it's a big challenge. And Arabic countries, there's a lot more kind of an airy, graceful, ethereal design to their experience. I'm ripping through this because I've got 4 minutes. 2 minutes. Sorry. Right to the left interaction. This is something that I've learned a ton about in this job, because previously I was working kind of in the Midwest for a chain of newspapers, and I wasn't an expert in Arabic at all, or some of these other right to left languages. It's not just switching the alignment in Word where you press the align button. You have to redesign all the interactions, and especially when you're using native components, that the animations, a lot of them are built for left to right and not right to left. So, how pages flip, how transitions happen. You don't just, left align and call it a day. And again, this is really crucial to have a diverse test base, people that have read the language, can read the language on your team. It helps you turn it so much faster. Modular grids, this is another thing that we really embrace, the MVC model, separating design from the data, balancing features, build on grids that collapse, so that if we have to pull out things for really low bandwidth entities, it can be fast enough. Customer service, super critical. The greatest gift you can ever have is an angry audience member that tells you why they're pissed. And we listen to this all the time, and we're getting angry comments in Arabic, angry comments in Russian, and we go and talk to our language services, try and get them translated, and try and give them feedback, like walk them through, figure out what's wrong. We've got built-in bug reporting that tracks everything possible about the device, what version they're running, what the device is, so we can track and kind of find bugs faster, and get feedback on what user experience is really frustrating them, and their bandwidth also. That's such another big challenge. And again, always be testing everything possible, from paper prototypes to quick mini 5-second usability tests. I love that site. Tracking bug reports, tracking user feedback, tracking user store reviews. Just collect as much data as possible and really take time to focus and kind of digest it. I've got kind of a 2-hour period every week that I just kind of pull in all the information, just kind of see where we're at and check in. I mean, you can have tons and tons of data, but you don't do anything with it. It's pointless. So what's the results been? Ranked in the top 10 to 20 news apps for most of these countries we really focus on, with peaks in the first 1 to 10. And again, this is all purely organic. We don't buy placement or anything like that. We have a 5 to 4.2 average star ratings in the stores, and we're Global Mobile Awards GSMA finalist for best mobile publishing product. Webby Awards finalist this year. Appy Awards finalist. We'll find out Wednesday, if we won the Appy Award. We didn't win either of the other two, but finalist is nice, especially in a government organization, the resource we have and all that fun stuff. And I'm on time, so thank you. I can probably take one question. If you guys want to talk in the hall or anything, I'm going to be here all these 2 days, so catch me, or you can ping me on the internet. I will try and answer on Twitter any questions that were sent, and send out those 2 links to the video and the other thing I mentioned, the color grid. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Anyone have one question? Or do I not have enough? No immediate questions? Okay, thank you.